It was one of those quiet mornings where the world feels too still, like it's waiting for something to go wrong. I'm standing at my kitchen sink with a mug of burnt coffee, half awake, staring out over my lower field. And that's when I see them. 3 grown men in full camo, moving through my grass like they've got a deed in their pocket. Rifles slung, backpacks, that slow, confident pace like they're not sneaking, they're just arriving. My stomach dropped so hard I swear I felt it hit my boots. Because this wasn't public land. This wasn't some shared trail. This was my family's place. 92 acres outside of Red Bank, North Carolina, passed down from my granddad, then my dad, then me. And I had never, not once, given anyone permission to hunt here. I set the mug down so carefully you'd think it was made of glass, grabbed my phone, and zoomed in. The image was shaky because my hands were shaking. One guy stops and scans the tree line like he's checking his own backyard. Another bends down at my fence post and fiddles with something. That's when I see it. A trail camera. Not mine. Mounted on my post like it belongs there. And right then the anger hit, hot and clean, like somebody finally flipped a switch in my chest. These guys weren't lost. They weren't, oops, sorry. They'd been coming here. Repeatedly. Like my land was a free add-on to their weekend lifestyle. I'd moved back 2 years ago after my dad died, took over the old farmhouse, kept my remote tech job, tried to live quiet. I'm not the loud guy in town. I don't pick fights. I'm the guy people assume will shrug and let it slide. And for a second, I could feel that old reflex in me, the one that says, don't make trouble. Then I remembered something my dad used to say when a neighbor let their cows wander onto our property. If you don't draw your line, somebody else will draw it for you. I hit record on my phone, not because I wanted drama, but because I knew how this works. People lie when they get caught. And then I walked out. I didn't run at them. I didn't charge in like some action movie. I kept my distance, hands visible, voice steady. 50 yards out, I called, hey, stop right there. All 3 turn around, and I get a good look. Middle-aged. Expensive gear. The kind of camo you buy when hunting is your personality. The tallest one, gray beard, raises a hand like we're old friends. Morning, he says, smiling like I'm the weird one for interrupting. We're just doing a little hunting, no harm. I kept my voice level, but I could feel it shaking underneath. You're on private property. This is my land. You need to leave. The stocky guy shifts his rifle like it's annoying him to hold it. We've hunted this stretch for years, he says. Never had an issue. And I swear, the way he said it, like that history gave him ownership, like time spent trespassing becomes a right. I swallowed, and I said the part that tasted bitter. My dad was sick the last few years. He didn't catch everything. I'm here now, and I'm telling you to leave. The third guy, quieter, steps forward like he's about to drop the magic words that make this okay. We're with the Hawthorne Creek HOA, he says. We've got access to recreation land around the neighborhood. I actually laughed, just once, because it sounded so absurd it couldn't be real. An HOA? I said. This place isn't part of your neighborhood. It's been in my family since 1951. There is no universe where your HOA owns my pasture. The bearded one points over the ridge toward a cluster of big new houses you can barely see from my side. Hawthorne Creek is right there, he says. When it was developed, arrangements were made. Show me, I said. Show me the paperwork. The stocky guy spreads his hands. We don't carry it. Of course they don't. Because people who are right don't leave their proof at home. Then the bearded one tries to soften it again. No need to get hostile, friend. That word friend, coming from a man holding a rifle on my land, made my skin crawl. I'm not hostile, I said. I'm clear. Leave. If you come back, I'm calling the sheriff. Not debating. Not negotiating. For the first time, the smiles drop. They start backing away, muttering, throwing those little looks people give when they're trying to decide if intimidation will work. I followed them all the way to my fence line, watched them climb through like they'd done it 100 times, then disappear over the ridge. And the second they were gone, I called the county. The deputy who came out later was professional, tired in that way you get when you've seen too many neighbor disputes turn ugly. She walked the line with me, took photos, wrote down what I found. Trash, boot prints, a cheap tree stand strapped to one of my oaks, and 3 trail cameras that sure weren't mine. When I told her about the HOA claim, she frowned. HOAs don't get rights outside their own properties, she said. Not unless there's a recorded easement. And that's not common. That word recorded became my obsession. Because I knew the truth emotionally. It was my land. My dad never signed anything. End of story. But I also knew the kind of people who live behind gates and call everything a community. They don't run on truth. They run on pressure. So the next morning I drove into town, sat across from my dad's attorney, Mr. Sutter, a man who still uses paper folders like it's a religion. He reviewed the deed, the survey, the county records, and he didn't even hesitate. There is no easement, he said. Nothing filed. Nothing signed. Your title is clean. I felt relief, but it was mixed with something else. Because if they had no legal right, then what they were doing was pure entitlement. And entitlement doesn't stop when you show it facts. It stops when you make it expensive. Mr. Sutter sent a cease and desist to the HOA and their president, a woman named Kendra Mott. I didn't even meet her yet, but I could already picture her. Perfectly styled, perfectly confident, the kind of person who thinks a clipboard counts as authority. He told me to post no trespassing signs in a way that meets state requirements for prosecution, and to stop confronting anyone myself. I listened. I bought bright signs, a heavy stapler, and I spent an entire afternoon walking my boundary, planting warnings every 50 feet. I was sweating, sunburnt, and honestly embarrassed that I even had to do it, like I was labeling my own house mine so grown adults wouldn't forget. 2 days later, I get a letter from an HOA lawyer claiming there was a verbal understanding with the previous owner. A verbal understanding about hunting access to a private farm. I stared at that sentence so long I felt my jaw tighten. Mr. Sutter called it what it was. Nonsense. If it's not written and recorded, it doesn't exist. And I thought, okay, they'll back off. They've been exposed. Nope. 3 mornings after I put those signs up, I walked the line and found shredded orange plastic everywhere, tossed into the creek like someone wanted me to see the disrespect. Not just removed, destroyed. That wasn't confusion. That was a message. The deputy came back out, documented it as vandalism, and said quietly, "They're escalating." So I escalated in my own way. I replaced the signs, and I put up cameras, not hidden, not sneaky, just there. The very next night, the footage caught 3 people working down my line like a cleanup crew, pulling signs, ripping them, laughing. One of the men was the stocky hunter from the first day. The woman with them wasn't Kendra, but she looked like someone who'd never been told no in her life. I forwarded the video to the deputy and my attorney, and I waited. That's when the HOA tried a different tactic. I got a notice from the county planning office saying a complaint had been filed about me blocking access to recreational trails. Trails. On my property. They wanted me at a hearing in 2 weeks, like they could turn my land into a public argument if they used the right department. And I won't lie, that one rattled me. Because when someone drags you into bureaucracy, it's not about winning, it's about exhausting you. Mr. Sutter told me, that's the whole play. They want you tired. We show up prepared. So we built binders, deeds, surveys, photos, reports, the videos. A timeline so clean it could have been a court exhibit already. In the meantime, the harassment turned personal. My email started getting messages calling me selfish, a bully, a hermit. Social media comments from people I didn't know, insisting the trails belonged to the community. Late night, slow drive-bys. A bottle thrown near my porch. Someone dumped a pile of construction junk by my gate like they were trying to dare me to react. I kept documenting. Because the hardest part about being targeted is how badly you want to scream back, and how dangerous it is if you do. The hearing room was packed. Kendra Mott sat up front like she owned the building, surrounded by neighbors in hiking vests and family values smiles. She spoke like my land was a resource they'd been responsibly enjoying. She called me an outsider, even though my family had been on that dirt longer than her subdivision had existed. When it was our turn, Mr. Sutter didn't raise his voice. He didn't insult anyone. He just laid out the truth, page after page. No easement, no agreement, no legal basis. Then he showed the vandalism, the video, the damage. The officer running the hearing read quietly for a long time, then looked up and said, "Complaint dismissed. This is private property. Continued entry is trespassing." Kendra shot to her feet, furious. "We've used those trails for years." And the officer, bless him, said, "Then you've been trespassing for years." The room went dead silent. I should have felt victorious, but I mostly felt wary because the way Kendra looked at me as we left. It wasn't over. It was personal. 2 weeks after the hearing, I found a deer carcass dumped near my boundary, field-dressed, and left to rot like a warning sign made of flesh. I stood there staring, and something in me went cold. That wasn't a prank. That wasn't "we're mad." That was someone saying, "We can do what we want here." I called wildlife enforcement first, then the sheriff. The warden who showed up was the kind of man who doesn't do drama, just consequences. He examined it, took photos, said flatly, "This is a legal take and waste. If we ID the shooter, it's serious." My cameras didn't catch the kill, but they caught 3 figures moving along the fence line at night with long shapes on their shoulders, and that was enough for the sheriff's office to assign a detective. Detective Ferris showed up, spent hours going through everything, and said, "We've got repeated trespass, vandalism, harassment. The challenge is tying specific acts to specific people." Then I remembered a clip I almost ignored. My driveway cam, late at night, a truck slowing down, something thrown, then speeding off. That was the night my mailbox got smashed. I zoomed in until the pixels looked like mush, but there it was. A partial plate, and the clearest thing of all, a silver F-150 with a custom grille you could spot from space. I sent it to Ferris. He ran it, cross-checked it, and called me back with a tone that said the game just changed. "That truck belongs to Wade Mott," he said. "Kendra's husband." After that, things moved fast. Search warrants. Interviews. People suddenly misunderstood and were told it was allowed. In the Mott's garage, investigators found torn "no trespassing" signs, still recognizable, like trophies. They found unopened trail cameras matching the ones on my posts. And then they found the part nobody could explain away. Emails. Not a direct, "go commit crimes." Nothing that stupid, but plenty of "don't let him intimidate you." Plenty of "keep using the trails." Plenty of "make it uncomfortable so he gives up." One message from Kendra said, "If the legal route stalls, we need to remind him he's not welcome." And once you read that after a deer carcass shows up, after signs get shredded, after your mailbox gets wrecked, it stops sounding like motivational talk. It starts sounding like coordination. Charges followed. Not just citations. Actual criminal cases. Wade took the first hit for property damage and restitution. A couple of the guys from the camera footage pled out on trespass and vandalism with orders to stay off my land. And Kendra fought it, because of course she did. People like her don't accept boundaries. They litigate them. The courtroom process was slow, stressful, expensive, and exhausting in that deep way where you start to question whether peace would have been cheaper. But then I'd remember the first morning, those men walking with rifles like they owned my grass. And I'd remember the shredded signs in the creek. And I'd remember the carcass. And I'd think, if I fold now, I teach them they were right. The verdict didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like an exhale. Kendra was found guilty on harassment-related conspiracy, got probation, community service, restitution, and a permanent no-contact order. The HOA board removed her in an emergency vote the minute the story hit local news. Half the neighborhood acted shocked. The other half acted like she was a martyr. That part messed with me more than I expected. How many people will defend bad behavior as long as it benefits them? A year later, the new HOA president sent me a formal apology, promised respect moving forward, even offered to pay for some fence repairs. I appreciated the words, but I didn't trust them the way you trust someone who never tried to take from you. I kept my cameras up. I kept my signs. And the trespassing mostly stopped. Here's the part one still think about, though. One morning, months after everything cooled down, I found a small bunch of wildflowers tucked into the barbed wire near the spot where I first confronted those hunters. A note was wrapped around the stems. No name. Just, "You were right. We were wrong. Sorry." I kept that note. Not because it erased what happened, but because it reminded me that sometimes the loudest bullies aren't the whole group. Sometimes they're just the ones who speak first, and everyone else follows until somebody finally says no. And that brings me to the question that still splits people when they hear this story. Was I protecting my rights? Or was I being too rigid about land that could have been shared? Because I've had strangers tell me I should have just granted an easement to keep the peace, that community matters, that people need trails. And I get it. Nature should be enjoyed. But here's what I learned the hard way. There's a difference between asking to share and deciding to take. One is neighborly. The other is entitlement with a smile. So I want you to tell me what you think. If you own land your family worked for, Would you ever open it up to people who started by trespassing, lying, and tearing down your boundaries? Should I have negotiated earlier, or did drawing a hard line save me from losing control of it forever? Drop your take in the comments. And if you've ever dealt with an HOA, a neighbor, or anyone who tried to claim what wasn't theirs, share your story too. I read these, and I promise, you're not as alone as they want you to feel.